If you avoid these three things in prison, you exponentially increase your odds of going back home a man. That's right. I'm going to give you the top 3 things that you should avoid if you go to prison, if you want to keep your manhood intact. And I don't care if you're doing a 60-day bid or a 60-year bid. If you avoid these 3 things, the chances of you remaining a man exponentially go up. They don't guarantee it, but I promise you, it will help you dramatically to avoid these 3 things. And we ain't gonna mess around. We're gonna jump right into it. And I'm gonna start off with the one that I think is the most important one, and that's punks. If you avoid punks in prison, the chances of you keeping your manhood drastically goes up. Now, I'm gonna give you a few stories of how it can happen, when it can happen, and why it will happen. And I will use myself as an example. 2 instances where punks approached me and I had to make a decision. First instance was in DCI, Dixon Correctional Institute. And I was in a cell, and I didn't spend a lot of time in DCI. I only spent like a couple months in DCI, and I was in a cell block, extended lockdown. And when I was in extended lockdown, if you know anything about DCI, and I'm trying to remember correctly, DCI got the solid steel doors with the chicken wire. And the chicken wire is basically, there's a door that's solid steel, and there's a flap that opens like this, where they put your food in and out during child time, or that's the way you get your mail. And the chicken wire is on side of the steel door. And the chicken wire is literally, picture chicken wire, except super thick steel, you know what I mean? Chicken wire. You ain't bending this chicken wire. You could beat your head against the chicken wire. They're gonna stare at you and look at you like you crazy till you fall out. All right. Well, they had this orderly who would serve the food. And I was a young dude when I was in DCI. I was 19, 20 years old. I was a little young white dude, and I looked like a little young white dude. And the biggest victims inside Southern prisons when it comes to sexual assaults is young white dudes. Is it just young white dudes? No, it's not. They victimize young black dudes too, young Spanish dudes. It don't make a difference. In Louisiana, they don't discriminate. I just made a video where they tried to turn a special needs dude out. So listen, they do not discriminate and turn anybody out. They getting booty any which way they can. So I'm in this cell, and this dorm orderly, after a couple days of serving my food, I guess, I laughed and joked with him. And that's the first thing you should never do. Laugh and joke with nobody you don't know. You don't know this person. So if they crack a joke and you laugh with them, you opening the door. Do not open no doors in prison, because an open door can mean to an open booty. And you don't need that in your life. And I'm trying to help you. Or if you got a son and you know he's going to jail and he likes to laugh, ha-ha, and kiki about everything, tell him tone it down, because them dudes going to try to open his backside. I'm trying to help you today. All right. So this dude starts telling me that he likes me. That's what he tells me. He says, say, bruh. He said, I really like you, yeah? I'm like, what you mean like me? He's like, man, you know what I mean. And I'm like, nah, I don't know what you mean. I'm kind of like shell-shocked. And he's like, you know what I mean? And I'm like, nah, I don't know what you mean. He's like, yeah, man. He said, I get down. I said, man, what you mean? He said, man, look, I'm a homosexual, man. He said, I ain't just a homosexual. I like girls and boys. I'm locked up in here. He said, we got to do what we got to do. He's like, I'll let you hit me. I said, you'll let me hit you? And I'm not saying it like I'm booting up. I'm like, D in the headlight look like, man, what the freak is this dude talking about? And so I tell him, no, I don't do that. I told him, and I was young, I had a girlfriend at the time. I said, I have a girlfriend, and I don't mess with dudes. And he's like, all right, man, bet, you know what I mean? And after I told him that, I'm thinking he's gonna respect me, but he kept coming at me. So the tier reps or the tier orderlies who hand out the food, they don't have access to the inmates that are in extended lockdown. You're never supposed to come in contact. So I can argue with this dude all day long. They call that bar fighting, but it don't do no good to bar fight with anybody, because a bar fight could turn into a pee fight and a feces fight. You know what I mean? And if you ain't mentally built for it, bar fighting will tear you down. I got stories on that we'll talk about later. But back to the dude who was trying to, get me to hit him, or he was really trying to hit me, if we're honest with it. So anyway, he comes back to me and he says, and he's serving the food day after day, you know what I mean? And so I try to keep it cordial with this dude, because he is serving my food, and I don't want him doing nothing to my food, and I have to eat to survive. So, but one day he tones it down a little bit, but a few days later he says, say, bro, let me see you jack off. I said, what? He said, man, he said, I know you say you straight. He said, but you could jack off and I could just watch you. And I'm like, man, and I just ignored him. I'm like, all right, man. And so my heart's pounding. I'm like, man, if I can get to this dude, we gonna fight. You know what I mean? So fast forward to one day during shower time, they hit my cell and he was still on the dorm. He was still on the tier. Usually the orderlies have to be off the tier when they open the doors up, single cells, for you to go shower. Well, they opened my tier and he was still on the dorm, and I don't think the officer seen it, or the officer knew about it because he told the officer, say, rack back that cell with that little dude in. He said, I'm going to try to get him. Them officers will let other inmates have their way with you. They get cool with them. They don't care about you. They will let somebody turn you out or victimize you in any which way. So the cell ball orders, this is what makes me think that he actually communicated with the officer, because when my door opened, he actually was standing in front of my door, and I just remember my door opens and me and him staring each other face to face. This is the first time we had contact to where we can actually get at each other. As soon as my door opened, he drops his nuts. And I'm thinking that makes me think, even to this day, is the first time I'm actually thinking that. I never thought about that before till now, that officer probably was in conjunction with this inmate so the inmate can have an opportunity at me. And he thought when the door opened, I was going to tuck my tail and not do nothing. As soon as he kind of stepped toward me. He stepped in my cell and boom, I hit him first. We started fighting. Boom. The fight lasted for about 40 seconds. Boom, 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 boom. We trade blows. And then all of a sudden, he backs out the cell and my cell door closes. You know what I mean? He goes to the front and everything. Nobody saw the fight except me and him. It was a one-on-one right inside my cell. We got in a quick little fight, quick little scuffle. I would say, honestly, I don't think anybody really won the fight. It was about a draw. And, he walked back out. You know what I mean? But and I never had to worry about him again. That didn't mean that this dude still didn't have thoughts in his head. These people are sick, I'm telling you. So it doesn't matter. You really got to get busy to make these fools understand. But some of these dudes are so twisted in their mind, even then, they do not understand. So I avoided that, you know what I mean? And I got in that fight with that dude. And then that's an instance where if you can't control your sexual desires and you just want to get your rocks off, so to speak, and you start fiddling with yourself so another dude can watch you, you are opening a door, and that's called messing with punks. And if you start messing with punks, you eventually going to turn into a punk, or you're going to turn into somebody whose life is controlled by the desire to be with punks and other men. It's a twisted game that exists inside prison. The other instance I want to tell you about, I was in Allen Correctional Center, and they had this punk that came up to me and said, look, the punk came up to me straightforward. They had a bunch of punks too. And this punk came up to me and said, hey man, look, you want to be my old man? And I'm thinking, see, I know the game at this point. I ain't gonna to be a punk's old man, you got to be one of the baddest dudes on the block. You know what I mean? You got to be about your business, because you got to fight all the other dudes who are trying to take you a punk. And so I'm not about that. So this punk's asking me if I want to be his old man. I'm not a stupid dude. When it comes to being in prison, my IQ is, I ain't going to say I'm the smartest, but it's better. It's way above the average in there. You know what I mean? And so I can peep game real quick. And I'm like, you want me to be your old man? That's what the punk tells me. I want you to be my old man. And I'm like, now I'm like 21, 22 years old. And I'm like, nah. I said, I'm good. I said, I don't mess with boys. He said, all right, it's cool, everything. He said, I just wanted to proposition it to you, you know what I mean? Give you that offer. I knew what the punk was doing. Let me tell you how I knew what the punk was doing, because they had another little white dude that came in the dorm, roughly same age as me, give or take. And he came into the dormitory, and the punk propositioned him. He went underneath the bunk with a punk. I talk about that in my videos. Don't go underneath no bunk with no punk. So he goes underneath the bunk with the punk. And next thing you know, every weekend, man, they underneath the bunk together. You know what they doing? They making love underneath that bunk. That's what they doing. That's right. So what eventually happens is this dude, you know what I mean, falls in love with the punk, and he starts developing feelings for the punk. And when they underneath that bed, that punk is putting fingers in them, or they switching around. That's what they do. That's what they call it. And so the punk really has a pimp. And then the pimp finds out from the punk that the other dude who thought he was just being the punk's boyfriend, now the punk's revealing to the pimp of the prison that this dude likes it both ways. Now the pimp approaches the dude that the punk talked into becoming the boyfriend, old man. And the pimp slaps him in his face and says, I know about you. You're going to start wearing tight clothes, and you're going to start dyeing, you know what I mean, your t-shirts and putting, little twist ties in them. And you know what I mean? You're going to sit down to take a leak. You're going to sit down to pee. Now you a boy. And so this dude got turned out, came in, got interested, got friendly Bob with the punk. Listen, when that punk told me what that punk told me, I never really had interaction with that punk then. We never talked. I didn't, the punk didn't, disrespect me, and I didn't disrespect the punk. And it was, it was just like I avoided the punk, not, but this dude, he got played. He played himself, man. It's a deadly game, man. You don't understand it till you understand. And he became a girl in prison. And it's unfortunate, he fell victim to the friendly Bobness. You don't have to be friendly with nobody to tell him no. Or you could just be a savage. Some dudes I know who, they just straight savages. If anybody will come up to them, they might try to chop their head off. They got people like that. You could do that too, but you got to be willing to take the consequences with that. You better be about your business, Or you could be, just somebody who stood up and fight like I did, whenever the opportunity came and I had to, I stood my ground, And that's how it can happen to you. You can become a punk if you mess with punks. So the first thing you should avoid in prison is punks. The next thing you should avoid in prison at all costs, if you want to keep your manhood, because even though this one does not involve punks, doing it can lead to you losing your manhood. And that is drugs. That's right, drugs. If you use narcotics and you addicted and you can't control yourself and you need to, get your fix and you can't pay it back, well, you're going to have to pay it back some kind of way. And they're going to get it from you, from your backside. And that's what happens. On top of that, when you're using narcotics, I've seen a lot of people in prison use narcotics. And when they use those narcotics, they got their family sending them money. That's right. These dudes come in jail and they still got a wife, a mama, or a family member, grandma, or even a father who's sending them money. And they're using that money to get loaded on drugs because they a punk. You ain't a punk yet, but you a punk. If you are using your family's hard-earned money to get loaded on narcotics in prison, you are asking for trouble. And you showed that you're not a changed person. And it's all about being a changed person. You know what I mean? And listen, is there drugs in prison? Yes, we all know that there's drugs in prison. So why would you want to use drugs in prison? You know what I mean? If you use drugs in prison, I'm telling you, man, it's going to go bad for you eventually because you're not going to be able to pay it back. And you're going to have to find a way to check in, to PC. And in Louisiana, there ain't much of a PC. It ain't like these other states where they got sensitive need yards. There ain't no sensitive need yard in Louisiana. They're going to move you to another tier and that dude's going to send somebody else to get you, or y'all might run into each other in the canteen line. You know what I mean? The only way you could check in the state of Louisiana is you got to check into the dungeon. You're going to get put in the same, and then you're going to be on the same cell block with other dudes who are headbusters, and they just going to start throwing pee on you every day and feces. There ain't much protection in Louisiana. It's definitely a get it how you live state. You know what I mean? So you don't want to get involved in narcotics and old people unless you're about your business or unless you're giving up your booty. You know what I mean? Do not mess with drugs in prison. Now, I'll sit here and be honest with you. Did I ever use drugs in prison? Yeah, I was an idiot. I smoked a little bit of weed when I was in prison. But I slowly began to change when I was in prison. You know what I mean? And once I got that awakening, I started leaving everything alone, man. You know what I mean? But I didn't mess with no strong dope, man. I can't see these dudes I watch on these videos in these prisons on that K2 nodding out. Man, anything can happen to you when you nod out. If you nod out like a zombie on the street, man, you don't know what these dudes doing to you, man. They putting dirty mop buckets on dudes' heads. You know what I mean? Putting things up in them. You know what I mean? Stealing from them. You know what I mean? You got your canteen, man. You being disrespected, man. I know a dude. He admitted to me. He spent like 25 years in Angola, and then he spent after he left Angola, he wound up in Hunt, and then he wound up at Allen with me, and he did 35 years in prison. He had an armed robbery charge, and he had exponential amount of time. And he admitted to me when he was in Angola that his family had saved for his college tuition. He went to prison when he was 19, 20 years old, and he had an 80-year sentence. Anyway, he admitted that he used all his college tuition shooting dope in the penitentiary. That's right. He was shooting that dope in the penitentiary. He wasted his entire college tuition. And, this was back in the 80s. So I'm assuming his family had, $20,000, $25,000 saved up, and they still sent it to him. His mama sent it to him. And you know what I mean? He shot the dope up in the penitentiary. Other dudes were indigent. They didn't have nobody sending them no money. You know what I mean? So they get cool with people like him, and then they use him. A lot of dudes were shooting that dope back in the 80s and the 90s up in the penitentiary, man, in Louisiana, man. They were shooting that dope. They had needles, man. So it was wild. They were shooting that heroin, And so you want to avoid drugs at all costs. Listen, when you avoid these three things, at least the percentage of half, you increase your percentage by half to be able to do your time in a legitimate, peaceful manner where you can still keep your dignity. And keeping your dignity should be important to you. And the final thing that you should avoid while you're in prison is gambling. That's right. Do not gamble. I understand it's boring and there's a lot of stuff going on and you need something to pass your time. Well, learn how to draw. You know what I mean? Learn how to write. Write a book. Read a book. Read something useful. Man, if you staying and hanging out on the gambling table the entire time, you're going to gamble yourself into being a punk. And you don't want that for your life. And so dudes get tempted to gamble, and they gamble all their zuzus and wham-whams away. They gamble their manhood away. Listen, I know a lot of dudes, they gamble. They were about their business. The gambling table's busy in prison. You know, they play the tickets. They own these Super Bowls. You know what I mean? They own these NBA finals, playoffs. Right now, in prison, they got tickets running around everywhere. You know, spread, no spread, this, that, and the other. They bet on everything. Did I gamble? Yeah, I did a little bit of gambling, but not a lot. It was very minute, you know. I did it, you know, for a little fun part every now and then. I got interested in the tickets, and I never did it on the card table. I never one time gambled on spades, blackjack, 30 hearts, none of that. I only did it on the sports. I got interested in sports when I was in prison because I never did play sports growing up. So I bet on the basketball games and the football games. And I got bored with that real quick. And every time I lost, I paid up. And whenever I won, the people who I gambled with, they always paid me, so it wasn't an issue. I guess you could say I was blessed. I never ran into a problem. So you need to pick and choose who you gamble with if you're going to gamble. But I just gave you the top 3 things you need to avoid in prison that will exponentially increase your chances of making it out with your dignity and your manhood. Man, give me a like and subscribe to the Pen and the Shank, the most unusual and unique crime and prison channel experience on YouTube. We're just getting this thing kicked off. Man, share a video. Hit that bell notification. Let's get it. Share in the comments. Come on.